Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155 from UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not.
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcast. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championships, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Arnel De Leon, and hopefully you are doing well for yourself. You, your friends, your family, whether you live in the States or internationally, I hope you are doing pretty fine for yourself. Stay safe, be healthy, wash your hands, take care of your elders. Just overall, let's just try to do our best to make 2020 end off the best way we can. I know it's hard to say that considering the times we live in, but we are 3.5 months away from the end of 2020. And of course, the problems are going on right now, at least in America. Since I live in California, all this stuff is booming up here. But before I talk about the upcoming UFC event, I gotta talk about some other things, and it pertains to essentially sports world as a whole here. Coming up, we have Anthony Smith against Alexander Rakic being the next upcoming UFC Fight Night event. That'll be the main event. It'll be coming up this Saturday, August 29. It'll be a light heavyweight bout. It'll be taking place at the UFC Apex Facility Building. It will not be a pay-per-view. It's gonna be run through ESPN Plus. So if you have ESPN Plus, you can go watch it. And if you can't, well, try to find some way to watch it, because I try my best to watch every UFC event I can, or I try to watch every, even like Bellator Invicta event I can, because I love sports. It's awesome. I can quickly say that I am kind of addicted to sports in the sense that there's no way I can live my life without it. Like every single day I'm looking up basketball news, every day I'm looking at football news, every day I'm looking up MMA news. I'm always looking up and trying to see what the rankings are for every fighter. I follow fighters' Twitters, fighters' Instagrams, not just, MMA fighters. I follow a lot of other sports figures. I follow like LeBron James, Instagram, and although the guy can get really agitating, he's still really interesting. Like I go on YouTube and I've been following these vlogs. For those of you that are unaware, we got some athletes. So there'll be JaVale McGee, who plays for the Lakers. Matisse Thybulle, he's a rookie playing for the Philadelphia 76ers. And they record on the happenings of what's going on in Orlando, Florida, in what's called the bubble. So these teams are invited into the bubble, and then they go play, and you got these athletes who are recording the events happening in the bubble, because the National Basketball Association right now, currently, as I am speaking, is the most popular sport happening in America. It's the most popular active sport currently happening in America. And people are talking about the most recent incident that happened in Wisconsin, and people are pointing it towards sports, because even when I go on Twitter and I read up several people's viewpoints, news, opinions. I follow a lot of athletes, and I follow wrestlers, I follow radio personalities, and everything connects back into the incident that happened in Wisconsin. So for those of you that are unaware, in Wisconsin there was a man trying to find the specific city here. Kenosha. So in Kenosha, Wisconsin, on August 23rd, 2020, a man named Jacob Blake, 29 years old, was shot upwards of 7 times in the back. He was going to So it was reported on that there was a domestic violence issue going on. Police came to the scene. They met Jacob Blake. Jacob Blake went to his car. It was speculated that he was going to go grab something in his car. It was claimed that there was a real possibility that he was going to go to his car, grab a gun, and shoot on the cops. And so the cops acted on this idea, and shot the man upwards of 7 times. So he was hit 4 of 7 shots on his back, and there's debate going on whether or not it was excessive, or if the police could have done something a lot more better. it is being reported now. I'm just going off by like news I'm finding on my feed that there was no gun in the person's car. It was a knife. And then we relate back to another issue that happened where there was a 17-year-old boy who walked around with a rifle, shot people, and then and then there's no police that stopped him, and then he was able to get out of state, and then he turned himself in. And the reason I'm talking about this, and I'll connect it back to mixed martial arts and connect it to the UFC. It's because after this incident happened, the National Basketball Association, the teams, the players, the organizations, they did a protest. So there was supposed to be a game yesterday. There was going to be, I think it was like Milwaukee Bucks against the Orlando Magic, the Lakers against the Portland Trail Blazers, and the Utah Jazz versus the Denver Nuggets. And these games, here's some context. Those games are incredibly important. Incredibly important onto like what was happening, or like what was at stake in the game. There was a lot on the line. There were no championship games going on, but those were important integral games in the playoffs. It'd be the equivalent of like in mixed martial arts if there was like a number one contendership fight. Like let's say there was John Jones against Francis Ngannou. I'm speaking hypothetically here. And the winner of that fight ends up fighting against Stipe Miocic. But right before the fight happens, John Jones and Francis Ngannou both agree, you know what? We're not gonna fight. And then they just walk out. They just walk out the building, and then they go to like Fox or CNN, and they do like an interview with them and saying, nah man, we're not gonna play. And then they end up having the players ended up having a meeting, and the players involved like superstars, Chris Paul, LeBron James, John Wall, not John Wall. It would be a player like Damian Lillard. Okay, so Damian Lillard, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, LeBron James, major big names here. Names that are way more bigger. Those athletes will forever be synonymized as faces of sports culture that in no way ever can any fighter, whether it be in the UFC, Bellator, Invicta 1, can ever match. Think about the most popular fighter in the UFC. They are nothing in terms of the scale of popularity compared to the athletes that these NBA players are, compared to the Russell Westbrooks, compared to the James Hardens, compared to LeBron James, compared to Damian Lillard's out there. UFC fighters, in terms of popularity, are nothing in terms of socioeconomic status. Nothing. So, it's a lot more larger for these NBA athletes to go speak out. So can you imagine? Now, the first thing that came up in my head as the players and the athletes protest their games. Now, what would Dana White do? What would Dana White do in this entire scenario? Because simultaneously, while the players were protesting, Dana White was doing some interviews, and he was talking about his place, because he's going to go to a Republican conference to go talk. He's going to to the RNC meeting. He's going to talk, and he's going to promote Trump. So, and then it's weird because if you go on Google, you type up NBA, you'll see players protest over players protest. Political ideologies get placed in the forefront. And then we go, and if you type in UFC and or Dana White, Dana will go on and say, I don't care what anyone says, I do what I want. So, very, very opposite ends of the spectrum here. And here's the thing, if you type up NBA right now, I'm gonna do it as an example. So, I'm gonna go and type in NBA right now through Google, and I'm gonna see what pops up. First of all, I do see games being postponed. I got NBA boycotts. Top White House officials dismiss significance of the NBA boycotts. Barkley goes on to say, I've never seen anything like this. Both Lakers and the Clippers, the two favorites to win the championships. The two biggest teams right now in the National Basketball Association's organizations that are worth twice as much as the UFC. Billions of dollars. These two teams said that they are canceling the season. They are the two favorites. They are both currently leading in their playoff bracket right now. They are expected to become the champions, or are expected to meet each other, and one of them will become the champions. And it's very likely the Milwaukee Bucks, which currently has the number one player right now in the NBA, he could go and cancel his season as well. And I bring this up because while that's happening in the NBA, what's going on when I Google search UFC? What's the responses? So the response is, Georges St. Pierre is saying that Khabib doesn't want to fight him. We have Stipe Miocic saying Francis Ngannou rematch isn't exciting and he wants a new challenge. And they have Colby Covington. Really, not for as much as people want to bag on Colby Covington right now is at least he's on point. For at least he's speaking, at least when he talks, it's relative information. Now, although the guy's a complete troll, when he speaks, it's very, it's relative to what's actually happening in the world. So, Dana White goes on to talk about John Jones. We have Jason Mayhem Miller getting arrested, again. This is being reported in by Fox News. UFC on Dana White speaking at the RNC. He says, I don't care what people think of me, or what they think of me. So, once again, huge juxtaposition there of, and so if you go on the UFC Twitter, they're not talking about any of this stuff. They're talking about Rose Namajunas playing with their dog. We have the promotion for the UFC events. We have a birthday celebration. We got, another promotion for Paulo Costa versus Israel Adesanya. And I still remember that in the midst of the BLM movement and stuff, there was a reporter that asked Dana White, hey, why isn't there a statement being pushed out there on their viewpoint on BLM? And I feel like, I'm not gonna try to be overly political here. I don't want to give my viewpoint on like who's right, who's wrong. Are the NBA athletes correct for speaking out? Is Dana White and the UFC and their athletes, are they correct because they are shushing and they're not really putting themselves out there? Who is the right opinion here? Should you side with the NBA players speaking out? Should you side with the belief that NBA athletes believe that you should, that if you're an athlete, you should, do more with your cause beyond just being selfish? And right now, here's the thing with UFC mixed martial arts. A lot of the athletes are selfish. It's not a team-based sport, although there are teams. There are teams that exist. It's everyone out on their own. And so this leaves me thinking about, well, it's a very complicated issue right now going on in the States. It's a complicated issue that's going on, and I am surprised because here's the thing: I'm in the midst of editing my video about my young friends, because I had a discussion about what can the UFC do, or what can the mixed martial arts world do to be on point and in being relative. Because here's this: mixed martial arts is not popular. No, it is popular towards a niche audience, but it appeals to a very, 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 very niche audience. And it focuses on a very niche audience, and mixed martial arts in the grand sense of things just cannot compete with NFL, MLB, or basketball in terms of trying to appeal to that large demographic. And it feels like, I'm going to tell you, it feels like the UFC is more focused on doing, as the representatives of the UFC, the bookers of the UFC, Dana White, and the fighters, all of them are doing what's best for themselves. It feels like it's a land of vultures in that they are making the most out of their opportunity. Like, I can guarantee you right now, as I'm speaking right now, there might be a Chael Sonnen video saying, well, or Ben Askren or something. He'll put the video on and he's gonna be like, well, you have to understand in mixed martial arts, there's not so much money going around, and so you gotta make the most out of every opportunity. That's probably something he would say. He's like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening out there, but in this business, you have to do what you can for yourself at times. Yeah, it's not collective. It's not collective in the world of mixed martial arts. And I believe that if the UFC wants to become bigger, I know it's big. It's big in the world of mixed martial arts, but relatively speaking, it is bananas. It is small ants, small cockroach. It's chump change compared to every other major sporting organization. And I would like it if, you know what? Do you know what? He can just go out and say, I don't agree with the NBA. I think all the athletes there are idiots. He can go on and say that if he wants. Actually, I just want to hear something coming out from the MMA world, and not just some athletes talking about it. I mean, let's have actual major figures within the mixed martial arts world talk about the subject. You don't even have to agree with them. You know what? Dana White says, you know what? I don't care what people think. Okay. Put out a viewpoint, and if you don't care what anyone else thinks, then you won't be afraid putting out a statement out there. That's all I'm gonna say. Even if it's a statement that people are gonna, dog you on, at least it's something. It's something happening, and I wish UFC and mixed martial arts, in the grand sense, can learn how to be relative and can know how to, speak out and be more upfront with their organization and their, goals and stuff and their ethics relative to other organizations. So there goes my long rant here, but coming up after the short break here, I'll be discussing the upcoming UFC events. So coming back after the short break here. See you later.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. And so yet again, sorry for not primarily discussing about mixed martial arts and UFC before the commercial break here, but I just wanted to point that out because, I cover sports. I got a lot of other people who also cover sports. And when I talk about mixed martial arts and the UFC, a lot of what they do and their models and their plans seem outdated or isn't relative compared to other organizations. So I just had to talk about that. And so let's talk about the upcoming mixed martial arts event here. So we have here the UFC Apex Facility Build taking place in the UFC Apex Facility Building. It's going to be a UFC Fight Night event starring Anthony Smith against Alexander Rakic, with Robbie Lawler versus Neil Magny being the co-main event, Ji-Yoon Kim against Alexa Grasso, Ricardo Lamas against Bill Ageo, and Magomedov Ankalaev against Ion Cutelaba. And so let's look at the betting odds here and my predictions for this upcoming event. Alexander Rakic versus Anthony Lionheart Smith. Alexander Rakic is the favorite coming in at minus 325. Neil Magny is the favorite at minus 230 versus Robbie Lawler. Alexa Grasso is the favorite, minus 310 versus Ji-Yoon Kim. Magomedov Ankalaev is the favorite coming in at minus 350. And then we have, that's weird. Apparently the betting odds for the fight between Ricardo Lamas versus Bill Algeo, that betting odds hasn't been revealed yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be Ricardo Lamas coming in as the favorite. What's very eye-opening about this, though, is that the people who are making the bets, they are in the right here. I agree with every single of the betting odds. The only one that, all the underdogs and all the favorites are in the right. The only one here that's that's a toss-up, in that there's a real possibility of the underdog winning, would be Ji-Yoon Kim against Alexa Grasso. I believe Ji-Yoon Kim is definitely good enough. I think she's right now, she's around the range of top 15. She's around the range of top 15 in the women's fight division. Alexa Grasso is near at the top. She's around the 10. She's at the top 10 there. At this point, she's either outside the top 10 or barely in the top 10. And so you have to look at these both fighters' recent performances here and what the problems are. So Alexa Grasso has had a better string of wins compared to Ji-Yoon Kim. And the reason why it's very tough to place your bets and place your money on Ji-Yoon Kim is the fact that her biggest opponents in her career is weight cutting. She just struggles immensely over weight cutting. Her past 2 fights have been catchweight fights, and the one fight that she was able to make weight in, it was against Antonina Shevchenko, and at the time of the fight, Antonina Shevchenko had a whole lot of momentum going in, but now, with hindsight being in mind, Antonina Shevchenko is nowhere going to be near the top 10 for a while at this point. She came in expected to be top 10 about a year ago. At this point, she's been underperforming, and because of that, and we look at Ji Yeon Kim's recent performance against Antonina Shevchenko, it leads to people thinking, alright then, so Ji Yeon Kim lost to Antonina. Antonina isn't all that high in terms of the women's fight rankings. I still think it's absolutely ridiculous that Antonina Shevchenko fought against Caitlin Chookagian. Absolutely ridiculous that even happened in the first place, but whatever. And so Ji Yeon Kim struggles with weight cutting compared to Alexa Grasso. Like, I always say this, bet on the safe, bet safe. You always bet safe, even if your heart of heart says, you should go bet on this person. Unless you're so sure about the other fighter, you always bet on the safe fighter. You always do. Then again, I've been wrong with my bets. But Ji Yeon Kim versus Alexa Grasso, that's a toss-up. Ji Yeon Kim has won the past 2 fights compared to Alexa Grasso. She's won the past 3 fights. So both of them do have momentum carrying over. Ji Yeon Kim has failed to make weight in her past 2 fights. And when she does make weight, she tends to look really out of it. So for Ji Yeon Kim versus Alexa Grasso, that fight could end up either way. That's the fight out of any other fight happening in the main card that is most likely to have an upset victory. And then when I talk about the main event and the co-main event, I'm going to be talking about Robbie Lawler and Anthony Lionheart-Smith. Alright then, so I find this so funny, because if you go on Google, you type up the UFC Fight Night Smith versus Rakic, and then you see the fight card, Anthony Smith and Robbie Lawler look so similar. It's ridiculous. And here's the thing, they're even lined up on my screen to the left side, because you'll have 2 fighters on the left side, fighters on the right side, and for some reason they lined up both Anthony Smith and Robbie Lawler on top of one another, so it looks like you're just looking at a copy and paste picture. It's very funny. But Anthony Smith and Robbie Lawler, I do not buy either of those 2 fighters being legitimate title challengers or even contenders in the respective divisions. I just don't see it. So Anthony Smith, in his recent performances, yes, the guy, he's tough. No one's doubting that. The guy's a tough SOB. But when I look at his fighting style, he fights this very passive, very counter-heavy fight style that's based on being reactionary to his opponents. He has the same problem that John Dodson has, in that his timing is really good. His counterpunching is really good when he gets on track and becomes pretty aggressive and he's dictating the pace of the fight. He's really good. But Anthony Smith, you're as good as your last fight. When I look at Anthony Smith's recent performances, he fights this very safe, very passive style that contradicts the whole Lionheart thing that he's been going for. And when I compare that to somebody as Alexander Rakic, who can go put the pressure on him, I don't think Anthony Smith is going to beat Rakic. I just don't. And then the main event and the co-main event could end pretty much the same way. Like, the way how both fights are measured up. So we have Robbie Lawler against Neil Magny. This is just the worst stylistic matchup for somebody like Robbie Lawler. Neil Magny is a huge welterweight. Neil Magny can compete at light heavyweight if he wants to. But you know what? Neil Magny, he was gone from the fight game for a while. He made his return, and I'm telling you now, we are looking at the best version of Neil Magny we've seen. I've never seen a better strike-heavy version. Neil Magny's kicks have improved. He went from just being a boxer to being a really smart, high fight IQ kickboxer. Who completely, he struggled with this before, especially years ago. He has all this reach advantage, and he's obviously so much bigger than his opponents, but he doesn't take advantage of that. He doesn't abuse it. He is such a lengthy reach fighter, and he has such good tools. He has so many good tools that can help him in his striking, but he fights like a frail whale, and that was him many years ago. Nowadays, Neil Magny is in the best shape of his life. I've never seen him fought better than he's ever had. He looks awesome. His striking is awesome. His fight IQ has excelled a lot. Now compare that to Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler's last fight was against Colby Covington, I think. And let me look up Robbie Lawler. I think it was against Colby, because when I saw that fight against Colby Covington, it stopped making me become a Robbie Lawler fan. No. Two fights made me stop becoming a Robbie Lawler fan. I found his fight against Donald Cerrone to be very disappointing. Here's the thing. Robbie Lawler, he is 1-4 in the past 4 years. Let's go with that. He is 1-4 in the past 4 years. The last time he won, July 29, 2017, against Donald Cerrone. So his biggest win recently was against Cerrone. And I say this right now, I did not like that fight. I thought that fight was boring. I thought Donald Cerrone fought the right fight. I thought Robbie Lawler, I don't know what he was going for. I just don't know. Like and then you watch the RDA fight, and he did fight Colby Covington around this time last year. Like, what happened? The Robbie Lawler that people know him for, the Robbie Lawler that fought against Carlos Condit, that fought against Rory McDonald, that fought against Johnny Hendricks, that Robbie Lawler, like the warrior, the one that's gangster attitude, like this dude just cannot be put down. He's gonna go and pressure you all the way. I don't know. Like, he's not there. The Robbie Lawler people love hasn't been around in years. And then when you compare, here's what really upset me about his Colby Covington fight. Colby Covington was just laying down. Colby Covington, he's a good striker in terms of aesthetic wise, and that his striking looks good. But just like Kamaru Usman, your striking looks good, but we all know that you ain't knocking anybody out anytime soon, okay? It just ain't happening. Colby Covington will not have a knockdown on you. He's not going to. And in his fights against Colby Covington and Robbie Lawler, Covington is throwing out these really, I'm going to say right now, some soft-looking jabs, okay? Colby Covington, he's throwing out some tough jabs, but he's also just throwing out jabs for the sake of jabs, just to go accumulate points for the judges. And Robbie Lawler, it's I've never seen a fighter who tries to apply as much pressure and being the aggressor of a fight, but not do anything. If you haven't seen it yet, if you don't get what I'm talking about, put up Robbie Lawler against Colby Covington, and you'll be watching that fight, and you're gonna be like, what is Robbie doing? He's just moving his hand around. He's not, you know what Anderson Silva did when he fought against, Israel Adesanya? And then Adesanya would do these counter strikes, and then for some reason Anderson Silva will doing with his hands, he's martial arts. He's moving it across his face, moving across his head. It's not really doing anything. He's not blocking anything. He's not parrying at all. He's not fighting angles. He's just moving his hand wild and erratically, which I think is just meant to confuse your opponent, but your head is not even moving at all. So if the opponent is okay, so you're moving your hand a lot, I'm not gonna go for any hooks, I'm not gonna go for some overhands, I'm just gonna go for jabs, because jabs are the best thing to do when somebody's moving their hand erratically. Just go pierce through their defense. So that's what Robbie Lawler did. Robbie Lawler did that, just moved his hands like an idiot, while Colby Covington is slowly and softly pressuring him down with strikes, while Colby Covington is the one moving backwards. Oh man, it was so upsetting to me to go see that. And now we have Neil Magny, and Neil Magny, the way how he is right now, is gonna apply so much pressure onto Robbie Lawler, and Robbie Lawler, I cannot find, his counter punches are just not connecting. It's either he doesn't even attempt. Okay, he's Robbie Lawler will do the same thing when he did against Neil Magny, what he did to Colby Covington, in that Neil Magny is just going to overload Robbie Lawler with strikes, and the reach will be so much to Robbie Lawler, and Robbie Lawler will be so afraid of getting hit by these strikes that he's just going to go block and be like a statue, defend anything, and then he's gonna go for these wild shots that Magny will easily be able to spot. And unless Magny is an idiot, he's not gonna go duck under or dodge or block or move over, because Robbie Lawler has really easy tells when he wants to go for his knockout hits. And when he's not attempting any of those knockout hits, there can be a period of 3-4 minutes, even 4.5 minutes of Robbie Lawler just standing there taking these insane volume of shots and not responding. I don't get what's up with Robbie Lawler's game. It's like, the guy's a statue, he's a tank, and he'll take whatever damage he can, but he's just not going to do anything to to put himself in a better position to win. And the same logic applies to Anthony Smith. Same logic, and minus the hand movement, he's going to pressure his opponents by not doing anything other than moving forward, and his opponent is slowly going to clip him, going to put them down, is going to beat them through sheer striking alone. I'm going to say this right now. Both the main event and the co-main event are going to end by unanimous decision for Alexander Rakic or Neil Magny. There's a real possibility we can see Alexander Rakic defeat Anthony Smith by TKO, but I see the fight between Rakic and Anthony Smith and late fourth round by TKO or Rakic winning by unanimous decision. I see Neil Magny defeating Robbie Lawler after 3 rounds of action by unanimous decision. And this is a co-main event and main event that I'm still going to watch, but I'm going to tell you right now, I am not that excited for. I generally am not excited for both to see Smith and Robbie Lawler in the main event and co-main events and just accumulate strikes. Not a big fan. And so once again, you are listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back right after the short break here with some more MMA news. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So let's get on to the news brief. The first thing that pops up onto my feed when I type in MMA and or UFC to do my Google search, I look at the top stories. First story, Colby Covington. For as much, whether you hate Colby Covington or not, he's the only fighter I can think of who, at least when he speaks, he brings up relative stuff that's happening that is relative. Because right now, sports world is very confused right now. We got people taking on different sides. You know, I can respect somebody who's at least taking a side. I'm not going to tell you what my side is onto the issue. Even early in this podcast, I was talking about, hey, Dana, can you at least talk about the issue? It doesn't matter what your side is, whether you're on the right or you're the left. Just please be vocal and just say something, gosh darn it. Say something. Have an opinion. It's like you're all about, I don't care what other people think about me. Okay then, so you wouldn't be afraid of giving your opinion then. Just, So, first name to pop up on the stories, we got here Colby Covington. He's trashing LeBron James. So, okay. It's hard, here's the thing. So, even though I respect Colby Covington for at least being relative, to having talking points about certain controversial subjects. I'm not going to talk about this because one negative aspect to Colby Covington is that you just can tell at times whether or not he's on full character mode or he's not. Like the fine line between character and himself is just so blurred at this point now that it just gets agitating and it gets really upsetting to like try to read anything he's trying to say right now. But he's basically he's on the side of NBA players, shut up and dribble, like that issue now. Like, should NBA players be is it right for NBA players to protest about issues going on in like African Americans in America, considering their status right now? So, here's one thing also you got to understand about Colby Covington's viewpoint. So Colby Covington, how much money does he make? How much money does Colby Covington make? He makes like what, $250K per fight, $200K, $250K. That's not counting win bonuses. So we can say upwards of $300K he makes per fight. So he makes $300,000 per year. And then here's the thing: a lot of people who are trashing on to these NBA players when it comes to like, oh man, you guys shouldn't really have an opinion. It's because these NBA players make so much money. It's funny that it's amusing and it's interesting that Colby Covington, a dude who makes $300,000 per year, is trashing on LeBron James, who makes upwards of $30 million a year based purely on his contract alone, and not including advertising, not including bonuses, not including commercials at all, not including stuff he's trying to promote. Like, LeBron James is a billionaire, and every year he makes way more than $30 million every single year. And I always enjoy bringing up fighter economics all the time because I think it's super interesting that we can have a fight, like we can have like someone like Chael Sonnen and be like, hey man, I made a lot of money in competing for the UFC and in my career. I made over $1 million. I made millions of dollars. Okay, how many millions? Is it under 10 million? Because all these players nowadays make an average. Here's the thing. The average NBA player makes $7.7 million. The average. Meaning if you're ordinary, if you're basic, if you're not special, you're probably going to make almost $8 million per year. Alright. If you're not special, if you're a basic NBA player, you could make $8 million a year. If you're Conor McGregor or John Jones, you can make probably $5 million a year. What does that say? What does that say that the superstar of your organization, like the big names, the Khabib, the John Jones, the Conors, the Ronda Rouseys, what does it say when they make $2.5, $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, while Johnny come nobody in the NBA can make $8 million? Have any of you heard of a player named Alan Crabb? There's a player named Alan Crabb, basic as all heck. He averages 17 minutes per game, role player. If I type up like his Twitter, like his follower count is really low, he makes minimum $14 million per year. Do any of you who know who Alan Crabb, how much here? Who here knows who Alan Crabb is? Who here knows who Ronda Rousey is? Guess what? Alan Crabb makes upwards of 8 times as much money as Ronda Rousey. So when I see Colby Covington or anybody else trashing these NBA players, a lot of it does stem from politics, but a lot of it also stems from personal biases in the fact that, like, hey man, who are you to complain considering that you make $30 million a year while I work in an organization where you're trying to hustle all the time and it's considered big time money to even make $200,000. I always say this. Can you imagine if somebody, if the UFC bookers like Joe Silva were to negotiate money with LeBron James or with like Chris Paul or James Harden or Russell Westbrook? Dude, those athletes would laugh you off, try to get you fired, and they're gonna embarrass you online. It's like no. It's like, because here's, I'm a huge, I love two things. I love mixed martial arts and I love NBA. NBA is such a player movement. It's so based around player movements and athlete movement, and that the athletes dictate what's happening in the organization. And I know there are figureheads in the world of UFC will be like, well, it's actually not a good thing that the players have so much control of the organization. It's the organization that should have control over the players. Like, and it happens to be athletes. Like, you have like Daniel Cormier, Ben Askren, Chael Sonnen. Like, you'll have like all these old heads who'll be like, hey man, it's the organization that should be taking advantage of the players, and the players should all be the ones who should be hustling to succeed, when they know that if they, it's like, it's such a hypocritical thing that's happening. I know, I understand. UFC, MMA, boxing, the way how they undergo their organizations and their business models are far different from like the NBA model or the NFL model, but that's just how things are. And I find it, so whatever your viewpoint is on, athletes having so much power within an organization, whether it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, we can all agree on it would be awesome if we have these athletes be happy working for the organization they work for. They're not always complaining about the organization like I get to see every single day, and they make more money. I wish I could live in a world where all MMA fighters are making a minimum of $1 million per year. Minimum. Will that ever happen? Who knows? Maybe 10, 20 years down the line. But it shouldn't be 10, 20 years down the line. It shouldn't be a thing where it's big news for a fighter to make $500,000 or $1 million a year. It's ridiculous that that's big time money when you compare it to other athletes and other organizations who will fire their managers, fire their agents if they get paid freaking less than even $60 million over the course of 3 years. There was an athlete that fired their agents because, and everyone agreed that he got a lowball bad offer of getting paid $60 million over 3 years. He's like, oh man, you only got me a contract where I get paid $60 million in 3 years? Oh man, dude, you are an awful agent, man. You are an awful agent. How can you get me to sign such a low-paying bad contract? Nobody in the world of mixed martial arts or UFC will ever have the gall to do that. Nobody will have the gall to do that. So this is kind of coming in from MMAfighting.com, and we've got, so many negative news here. Former UFC fighter Jason Mayhem Miller arrested, charged with multiple felonies in California. This coming in, it is written by Damon Martin. Former UFC fighter Jason Mayhem Miller remains in custody in a Newport Beach, California jail after he was charged with multiple felonies on Tuesday. Court records confirm Miller was initially arrested on August 21st and is currently being held without bail. According to multiple reports, Miller was charged with felony counts for first-degree burglary, unlawful taking of a vehicle, and grand theft auto while on probation in a separate domestic violence case. He pled not guilty with a pre-trial hearing scheduled for September 2 at the Harbor Justice Center in Newport Beach. Irvine Police Sergeant Kerry Davis told NBC Los Angeles that Miller knew his alleged victim, who was not identified in the report. The 39-year-old UFC and Strikeforce veteran has been arrested numerous times over the past few years. In July 2019, Miller pled guilty to felony, vandalism, and misdemeanor violation of a protective stay-away order, and he was sentenced for 2 years in jail and placed on 3 years probation. According to court records in that case, Miller smashed a marble table at his girlfriend's home while also punching holes in her wall, removing doors from the home and derailing the garage door. Miller pled guilty to a single count of domestic violence back in 2017 while receiving a 4-year suspended sentence and 3 years probation for incidents with 3 separate girlfriends between 2015 and 2017. Previous arrests involving Miller included a 2014 incident where he engaged in a 5-hour-long standoff with a SWAT team outside of his home while providing updates over his Twitter account after police officers arrived to serve a warrant for allegedly stalking at the home. Ooh, okay, this is almost done here. This past September, Miller issued a lengthy statement apologizing for his behavior while promising to make mayhem great again. It goes without saying that I was acting like a madman for a good stretch for my post-fight life, and I can't make excuses for my behavior. I can, however, explain that I wasn't in the right state of mind for a very long time, as evidenced by my constant war with law enforcement, destruction of public property, domestic disturbances, and evading, but eventually I was caught and forced to take a long look in the mirror. I like to take the opportunity to apologize to everyone that I negatively affected during the dark times, including friends, family, law enforcement. Alright, whom I have abandoned for far too long. I'm sorry. Alright, Jason, you say that. You can do so many apologies up until it gets really ridiculous, and at this point no one really cares anymore because you're not... Okay, do you know... By the way, I have friends who go to rehab and have problem with the cops, okay, then? Like, this is nothing new. I can attest to you that all of us who are listening to the podcast here, we all know somebody who was a bit of a troublemaker and consistently, multiple times, throughout a week, is gonna, break laws or cause disturbances in some way. One of my friends was like that. Okay, for all I know, one of my friends is like that in the sense that he is super consistent as it pertains to him getting arrested. But whatever. Okay, so Jason, I'm not here to provide any, actual advice, but no one really believes you, okay? I'd like to believe you, but I'd like to actually see you, fulfilling your promises. You can't just say that I'm sorry all the time. You can't. And then, okay, this will be the last news brief here before I get to commercial break. Okay, but let's go on here. So, George St. Pierre goes on to say, UFC surely doesn't want me to run away with lightweight belt versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Speaking to BT Sports, St. Pierre called the chances of another return to the octagon incredibly low, given the likely outcome of another title win, retirement. It's tempting, and I will train hard. Now it's COVID, so it's illegal to train combat sports here. I train hard, and I feel I'm at my best, but the fighter is always the last one to find out when your time's up. I don't know. It takes 3 parties to make a fight. It takes one opponent, another opponent, and the organization. And I don't know if the organization would want that. I run away with welterweights. I run away with middleweights. They surely don't want me to run away with lightweight, and I'm 39 years old. I don't think I could go to 155 pounds without my performance being compromised. Alright. You're not wrong, GSP. But considering what happened, what's been going on in the year of 2020, and also 2019, titles being vacated, champions just leaving their divisions, champions retiring right now, the divisions right now in the UFC are a complete mess. They're a disaster. Rankings don't make all that much sense. Vacated titles. You know what? I won't be surprised. I won't be surprised if you give another opportunity. I won't be surprised if Dana White and Joe Silva are like, you know what? Our divisions are already whack as it is. Give GSP a title fight. Does it make any sense? No. It doesn't make any sense. But you know what? Both of these fighters, the lightweight belt is going to be vacated no matter who wins, GSP or Khabib. So let's just do the fight. Just do it. And so you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back right after the short break here with some MMA hot takes and some more news.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. Let's go and finish off the news brief here. This is coming in from MMAfighter.com. Luke Rockhold has come back. When I'm in the gym, I'm still the best MFer there. Alright, Luke. Luke Rockhold had a lot of reasons to step away from the UFC when he nearly ended his fighting career in late of 2019. A litany of injuries has started to pile up. By the way, this is coming in by Demon Martin also. Has started to pile up on the former middleweight champion, and more than anything, he just needed a break to get away from the sport while experiencing something else other than fighting. Considering almost his entire adult life has been spent competing at the highest level of the sport, between title runs in both the UFC and Strikeforce, Rockhold just needed a break, and the past year off has given him that. I wanted time to be able to do things I haven't been able to do and travel and not have any barriers of training camp and all these things. Luke Rockhold explained when speaking to MMA Fighting, it's getting around, traveling, doing a lot. I've been getting out to Montana, out to places that aren't so crowded, a little more freewheeling to say the least, enjoying life, doing things, traveling, the things I wasn't able to do. Letting my body heal up too, I was compromising myself so much the past few years, I opted to get a shoulder surgery and fix my labrum and my rotator cuff that was kind of nagging me for a while. The time off allowed Rockhold to wrap his head around something other than training camp or his upcoming fight, which was much needed during the break. 15 years of continuing fighting the best guys in the world, it's a lot on your shoulders, Rockhold said. It's just nice to get away and focus on the other things, and there will be a life after fighting, aligning myself with certain things that can make me happy outside. There's a lot that goes into it. Time definitely does heal all wounds. He also admits thanks to the coronavirus, the pandemic forcing a dramatic shift to day-to-day routines is just about every person on earth. Rockhold just needs some excitement in his life. The world is effing boring, man, Rockhold said. I need some more excitement. Kind of really comes down to that options are limited and I do miss fighting. Fighting is a part of me and I still have a lot left in me and the world is effing boring and I need something more. That said, he's definitely feeling better and better for each passing day. He was even able to contribute to a longtime friend, teammate down Cormier's final training camp before his fight against Stipe Miocic. I'm getting there, Rockhold said. My shoulder's coming around. I opted to do the shoulder surgery. I had an opportunity to get that done during COVID. Coming around that and everything else feeling pretty good, just letting the hands and the wrist and all of that without the impact of continually punching and cracking and missing. It's nice. Everything's coming back together. It's motivating to seeing the current climate of what's going on out there. I think it needs a little push. It needs some excitement in itself. So go and say, I feel being healthy and with clear mind with nothing on my shoulders. I'm a problem for every one of these guys. According to Rockhold, his comeback isn't happening with any set parameters regarding specific goals, which means he's not calling out any champions at this point. I'm not done. I don't feel like I'm done, Rockhold said. I feel like I have a lot more in me. I enjoy fighting. When I'm in the gym, I'm still the best mother effer there. It's about fighting, stepping into that cage with a clear head and a healthy body and taking out whoever is in front of me. And so Luke Rockhold, he thinks he's gonna, there's a chance he could go for a big comeback here, but what division he's gonna come back to? So he competed at middleweight and he had a spell at light heavyweight. And here's the thing, so I'm gonna look at Luke Rockhold's recent performances here and see, because there's a lot of reasons why it is easy to pick on Luke Rockhold, but as a fighter, Luke Rockhold, if you just look at the physicals, is really good. Like he's got the tools. I always say this for almost every athlete with a lot of potential, that he has all the tools. It is whether or not he can be able to put it together consistently. That's where the issues really lie then. So his fight against Yoel Romero didn't look good. His fight against John Blachowicz, his light heavyweight bout. Here's the thing. He looked good at light heavyweights. He did. His fight against John Blachowicz, although he got knocked out in the second round, in the first round he looked fine. First round of the fight, he looked fine. Yoel Romero, he didn't look fine. He looked good against David Branch. He just undersold how good of a fighter Michael Bisping is. But I always felt like it's always been a mental aspect into what is holding back Luke Rockhold, because if you look at his form, if you look at his fighting, if you look at his boxing, everything is crisp. Like, he's got all the tools to excel and continually be able to excel at a high level, whether it be a light heavyweight, whether it be middleweight. Rockhold is legitimately a really good fighter. I believe that he could easily get himself into the top 10, maybe top 5, based on how he is fighting and competing in the top 10. I think he is that good. Now, the problem, though, with Luke Rockhold is because every time you look at those fights, it feels like he is either underselling his opponents or he's coming to the fight with the wrong strategy. He did not respect at all John Blachowicz boxing at all, which led to him getting KO'd. So, Rockhold, where would I want to see him? I like to see him try out light heavyweight again. That's what I believe. I think he would have another good run at light heavyweight. And consider that the light heavyweight division is pretty much just dead at this point. John Jones vacated the title. We currently have Thiago Santos pretty much getting up there. Dominic Reyes is great. I would love to see Dominic Reyes against Luke Rockhold. I think style-wise, that would be a super fun fight to watch. We'll love to see Luke Rockhold get back to the octagon. When is he coming back? I don't know. Potentially he could come back maybe sometime next year. I could see it. I could really see it. And so let's get to the hot takes of the day. So every episode I like to end off with either doing like a quiz or, a test that, talks about how knowledgeable you are of the sport, or I even like looking at hot takes of mixed martial arts. And the first hot take I see is Stephen A. Smith was right. I'll ask right now. When Stephen A. Smith, when he critiqued Donald Cerrone, was he right? Because I still remember after the fight between Cerrone and Conor McGregor, everyone pretty much shat on Stephen A. Smith with his not so well analysis of the fight. But here's the thing. His analysis was right in hindsight, but his analysis is still based off ignorance. If it makes any sense. You can be right about something, but still be ignorant. So the problem is that Stephen A. Smith, he said he didn't feel like Donald Cerrone was really into it or really was committed into the fight. He felt like Donald Cerrone was out of it, that he wasn't trying that hard. Now, Stephen A. Smith is right, but it's the equivalent of... I'm trying to find an equivalency here. Let's say... Okay, so let's say in the Philippines, there was a volcano that erupted there, I think like a month and a half ago. Alright, so I have very little to no knowledge of geology, of mountains, of how volcanoes go on. I don't know the probability of volcanoes erupting or any specific volcanoes erupting in the Philippines. I don't. But if I were to go on and say, by the way, there's gonna be a volcano erupting tomorrow, and then 2 days later, it turns out that I was right, and I'm bragging about it. But yeah, I am right. Heck yeah, a volcano did erupt yesterday, and I'm so right on that, and you all should have listened to me. But here's the thing though, my knowledge of volcanoes is so bleak that I pretty much said a volcano in the Philippines is gonna erupt with no prior knowledge of how volcanoes work, and I'm just putting it out there in the whim because I just had to go say something. That's how it is with Stephen A. Smith. He was like, he doesn't follow mixed martial arts. He doesn't know that much. He does a thing whenever he has to discuss a sports at all, whether it be like, or even anything, when he has to guess, if he has to go discuss like golf, or I don't know, pro wrestling, or World Series of Poker, or chess, you know what he does? He probably Google searches like famous players from those sports, and then he just name drops them in the middle of a conversation in order to make him come across as if he is more knowledgeable of the sport than he actually is. And it felt like when he made the call for Don Cerrone, it was more of a case of him downplaying how good of a fighter Don Cerrone is than upselling how good of a fighter Conor McGregor is. And I don't know why Stephen A. Smith did that. Now, in hindsight, when he said that Don Cerrone just wasn't there mentally, he is right. In hindsight. But if you were to ask Stephen A. Smith, can you please elaborate and explain your belief as to why you don't think Don Cerrone was in the right frame of mind against fight against Conor McGregor, and you can do that without bringing up any of your own personal accomplishments in the field of reporting on sports, can you please do that? He will struggle. He will struggle. I still remember Joe Rogan on his podcast, he said like, oh man, dude, Stephen A. Smith, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then Stephen A. Smith, his rebuttal was, look here, I know what I'm talking about as it comes to mixed martial arts. You know why? Because I've been a news reporter for 30 years. And everyone was like, that doesn't matter. You're not wrong. It's the thing. He's saying stuff that's not wrong. But once again, it's the equivalent of me saying the volcano in the Philippines exploding, erupting. I'm not wrong that the volcanoes were going to explode was gonna erupt in the Philippines. But if you're to ask me why the volcanoes were gonna erupt, if you're telling me can you please elaborate as to why you believe those volcanoes were gonna erupt? The same way, can you please elaborate, Stephen A. Smith, why Don Cerrone wasn't motivated to be in that fight? Neither of us would give a good response. We would try to give a strongman's argument. I'll say along the lines of something like, well, you know what? It's been a while since volcanoes have erupted in the Philippines. So that's why I believe a volcano is going to erupt soon in the Philippines. Now, I'm not wrong, but I'm also straying away from the actual elaboration as to why I believe the volcanoes are going to erupt. And it puzzles me because I still remember Stephen A. Smith. He was like, yeah, I told you, he went on Twitter. He's like, because Donald Cerrone did in fact say that he wasn't right, he was not in the right mental space in that fight. And Stephen A. Smith, he goes on to say yeah, I told you that I was right. Now you can't question me anymore. No, we can still question you because only in hindsight does your judgment call make sense. Because for the most part, it doesn't. It really doesn't make all that much sense here. You know what? It also reminds me of another hot take when you can make arguments. I was part of a debate team when I was younger. You can make arguments that are not wrong, and because it is not wrong, you could kind of trick the opposing debater that what you're saying is right. It's weird. So when Skip Bayless, he can say something along the lines of, Nate Diaz fights in a much more larger division than Conor McGregor. He's used to fighting against bigger opponents. He doesn't fight against featherweights or bantamweights. He fights at middleweights. He fights at welterweights. He fights at lightweights. Pretty much, Nate Diaz is more prepped up for fighting at bigger divisions than Conor McGregor. And that's why Skip Bayless believed Nate Diaz would defeat Conor McGregor. See, all that makes sense, right? Everything I'm saying right now completely makes sense. And what Skip Bayless is saying makes sense. But then when you try to expand upon that, it goes from, yeah, it makes sense that Nate Diaz can defeat Conor McGregor, considering the fact that he's more used to competing at 155 over Conor McGregor is. Alright, makes sense. Then Skip Bayless will say, well, Nate Diaz is 70 pounds bigger than Conor McGregor, and he's used to competing against bigger guys than Conor, so he should win. And then Skip Bayless can go on and say, you can't say that I am completely wrong. Because Skip Bayless, he is not completely wrong saying that Conor McGregor is fighting against a bigger guy. But he's not 225 pounds, as Skip Bayless says it. And I'm telling you right now, dude, ESPN has some really questionable analysts when it comes to talking about mixed martial arts. And I would like it if the analysts up at ESPN are just more educated on the topics. That'd be really nice. I know, just bring in Herb Dean, bring in John McCarthy, have him educate them for about an hour on the sport. Now they're going to be tilted. You'll be like, oh man, I got this news journalism degree that I got from 30 years ago, right? Nah. They'll be tilted. But at least they'll be speaking about the topic of mixed martial arts from a place of knowledge, instead of an inaccurate prediction that they cannot hold up to unless in hindsight their prediction ends up going right. It's strange that's how ESPN works, but that's how it is. And that brings us to a close for today's podcast. You have been a great audience for today. I can't wait to talk to you guys next week. And so I gotta end off this podcast saying thank you. Thank you for tuning to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.GSMC.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.